Hybrid threats are threats that they're a mix of overt, covert, military, non-military means. We tend to think of threats between nation states as being very much in that conventional force, much as we're seeing in Ukraine at the moment, or things like intelligence. But what we're finding is that nation states, governments, are using a range of different tools that can affect other nations, particularly using the tools of liberal institutions and enabled by technology to try and destabilise governments, to make decision-making harder and slow decision-making, to make the situations much more ambiguous so they can push their own agendas. So it's often what Defence Department refers to as grey zone activity. That's what we're seeing more and more in our region at the moment.
And we've seen some recent examples. Can you share with us a few?
So often what's happening in the South China Sea can be characterised as a range of hybrid threats. We're seeing attacks on or intimidation of everything from fishing vessels of the nations around in that area, so Filipino fishing vessels, of harassment of activities on oil rigs. And in our own case, we're seeing, again, harassment. We saw most recently a harassment or intimidation of one of our maritime surveillance flights, which we undertake in that area, all as part of contributing to regional security. And that was quite a intimidatory act. We're also seeing, for example, governments will do, particularly Chinese governments, will undertake things such as abductions and kidnapping or, imprisonment of Chinese nationals. There's instances of, again, assassination attacks. So what happened with the Skripals in the UK, for example, is another example. Intimidation of researchers and journalists. And a lot of cyber activity also falls into that category, particularly leaking of material, use of ransomware, for example, undermining trust in systems and stealing IP. Those are all fall into that category of hybrid threats.
You're proposing the establishment of an Indo-Pacific Hybrid Threat Centre. What would that look like?
So I think that's yet to be worked out. We can draw a couple of, on the experience of what's happened in Europe. So the Hybrid Centre of Excellence that's in Finland has been in operation now for a number of years. And what they do is help nations identify hybrid threats, share a lot of information so everyone understands what's actually happening, because that's, again, part of the tactics used by adversary governments, is just trying to introduce that ambiguity, etc. Building capability and also trying to just establish a better understanding of that broader situational environment. So that's one thing, way we could actually help build better security in our region. It's a confidence-building measure. However, our region is not Europe, and I think it's often a mistake. It's very tempting, but it's often a mistake just to take that model and try and transplant it. There's lots of good things about that that I think we want to try and to echo or respond to it, that we can, on the lessons we can learn. But our own region doesn't have a lot of the institutions that helped facilitate the hybrid COE in Finland. We don't have a NATO. We don't have a lot of the practice and the shared understanding of security threats that exists in Europe and Western Europe. The hybrid COE is very strong in supporting democratic principles. And in our region, we have a lot of governments that are ambivalent towards democracy, even though they benefit from those liberal institutions and free market institutions. So I think that's yet to be worked out. That said, I think we need to start doing something on this now, and we can't wait for the perfect example or instance to be put into place. And even the hybrid COE started off with a small group of nations who bought into it and have steadily built that in the period since they've been established.
In setting up such a centre in this region, which countries do you think would and wouldn't be included here, and how do you think countries in this region would respond?
I think, again, we would benefit from being as inclusive as we possibly can, recognising that it might take some time for nations to buy in. And even if we don't get everyone on board, again, we can't wait for the perfect, the right perfect outcome, because everyone will benefit from just that shared awareness and getting more information out. It's going to be fairly clear that integrity and trust is going to be really important in this, and that's again a lesson from the Finnish-based hybrid COE. In their case, they actually have a provision in Finnish law which provides for the inviolability of that centre and its data, and that's really important for sharing that information. So just to get that integrity and trust, I suspect that the centre, in whatever form it's going to be, whether it's going to be a centre, and again, just bear in mind that the hybrid COE is also a decentralised model. They have communities of practice and draw on the research of a number of researchers in Europe and elsewhere. But the base is probably going to have to be in a democracy, simply so you have that rule of law and that openness, transparency and accountability. But then because some of the researchers, and again, we're in a heavily maritime environment, going to be in other countries. So there's going to be a lot of networking and sharing of that information. So that's how I sort of see that would start. And we can start using as proponent, the basis for establishing this. We've already got some nascent, again, early days, institutions such as the Quad, et cetera, which could support the establishment of the centre.
And just very quickly, who would largely be in charge of it, who would fund it, and how long would setting up a centre take? As you said, there is a real sense of urgency here.
There's a sense of urgency, but all these things take time, which is why we need to start now. Again, the hybrid COE has a long basis in the practice of that you can draw on from NATO, et cetera. It took them a while. It took them 5 years to get the thing set up, and then again, it's been 5 years they've been in operation. So you start to see the outcomes a bit down the track. In terms of where, again, it's probably have to be based in democracy. Who would support it? I'll be looking to the Quad nations and other allied nations that would contribute to that, because there's going to be a general benefit across the region. And even if nations don't initially contribute to it, they should be able to see benefits from its operations. The other caveat I would say is that you've got to have sustained funding. You don't want to have a centre in which you have a lot of the research and people just continually having to go back, and all the effort and all the overhead that's involved in fundraising can undermine its effectiveness. You need that independence to establish the trust and integrity of such a centre as well.
Dr. Leslie Siebeck, thank you so much. Really fascinating.
Great. Thank you very much, Yvonne.